Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nupehadda. Now, I don't have any deck profiles or anything like that per se, but a deck has recently came up in the competitive market that a lot of people don't seem to understand. What I'm referring to is Burning Abyss, and where they have won an event at a YCS, I believe. Quote or tell me below if I'm mistaken on that, but the people don't understand why Burning Abyss won. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, Burning Abyss is one of those decks that can be a fallback deck like Gladiator Beast used to be. Gladiator Beast, in its heyday, even after it no longer became relevant in the meta, was still a fallback deck that you can get to and still mess with your opponent, especially if they don't have any knowledge of these decks. Now, a lot of competitive players don't have knowledge of older decks, and that's only because they only try to remember what is currently relevant to them. And because of that, they either forget, don't care, both of those, or completely shoved out any information of past decks or cards, and they just go with what is modern. But Burning Abyss is one of those decks that you can fall back to. And I always find it weird that a lot of people are saying, Burning Abyss shouldn't be able to do this, Burning Abyss shouldn't be able to do that, when we're dealing with hand traps that activate whenever a card on your field activates, with the exception of Ash Blossom. But a lot of people don't understand that Burning Abyss activates in the grave. There's only a few cards on the field for Burning Abyss, like Dante and Malcoda and Virgil are really the only ones activated on the field. But they also have graveyard effects. Even Eternal Lady has a graveyard effect. Whenever she is destroyed by an opponent, either by a battle by card effect, she allows you to summon a Dante monster from your extra deck. Usually Dante, Pilgrim of the Burning Abyss. And he also has a graveyard effect as well when he's sent to the grave. There's only one monster in the entire archetype that does not have a graveyard effect, and that is Rubik. And he's the tuner. But that being said, not many decks utilizes the graveyard like Burning Abyss does. In fact, Gladiator Beast is probably the polar opposite and yet equal to the Burning Abyss in terms of how they function. The only difference is that they function by battle and not by graveyard effect. Whenever Gladiator Beast attacks or is attacked and they survive the battle, they can get their effects off to shuffle back in the deck, summon a new one, or do something from the graveyard or something of that nature. But they have to be involved in battle in some way, shape, or form. Now, some Gladiator Beast monsters do have effects that can activate from other Gladiator Beast, and there are some that don't need a battle. I don't remember their names at the moment, but for all intents and purposes, Gladiator Beasts function by battle, and Burning Abyss functions by whenever they're sent from anywhere to the graveyard. It doesn't matter if it's field, deck, banish. Well, actually, the banish pile, that's a technical aspect, but I'll talk about that here in a moment. But hand, deck, field, anywhere practically, when they go to the graveyard from anywhere, they'll activate. Now, for the banish pile to the graveyard, there is a stipulation of that. Now, depends on how they're being sent from the banish pile to the grave. If they're being placed there by like Omega, or if I recall the Burrow from Different Dimension or anything like that, they will not activate because they're not being sent there. They're being placed. That is a technicality that people don't realize. And there's also another technicality, and this has been used before. If you activate Phoenix Wind Blast or Karma Cut or anything, you discard a Burning Abyss, and they activate something like Transmigration Prophecy or Disappear, which is a very old card that banishes a card in the graveyard, as long as the Burning Abyss monster doesn't stay in the graveyard because of the cost that they had to do, then it will not activate. Instead of, a card that says that discard after such and such, or just discard. Phoenix Wind Blast and Karma Cut requires a cost of discarding a card from your hand to the grave. But if your opponent counters by banishing it with DD Crow, Disappear, Transmigration Prophecy, or anything like that nature, to banish the same card that you just discarded for a cost, it will not activate. Because it is currently not, it was never, it never successfully hit the graveyard, according to the TCG rules. Now, OCG, it doesn't matter. As long as it's sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter if it leaves or anything like that. Because of it being chained to or anything, because it was used for a cost, it will still go off. But in TCG, this ruling has been applied, but I think it was mostly because of the Stellar Knights at one point, and Burning Abyss had the bad luck of getting into that. But besides that, as long as they are sent to the graveyard and nothing else is happening at that moment to send them back from the grave back to the deck in terms of that chain at the same, because Burning Abyss cannot break a chain, nor can any other cards break a chain. They have to wait. Once the chain resolves of what is going on that's led them to the graveyard, that's when they activate. And you have Ghost Ogre, you have Ash Blossom and stuff like that. But Ash Blossom doesn't do anything to them on the field. Ash Blossom is our biggest threat. So Ash Blossom is the biggest answer to a Burning Abyss player. That's why Burning Abyss players will try to do things to get around that. But also, that is one of the reasons why they have been so successful, is because players don't understand this, at least modern players. Now, when Burning Abyss was topping for about 3 years and everything like that, when they first came out, people already knew the counters. They knew, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, Chain Disappearance, stuff like that. They had counters on the side deck for Burning Abyss, because Burning Abyss was such a overwhelming presence of swarm and control. Not only that, but they also had the backfield traps that allowed discarding to be no cost anymore. And this is one of the reasons why Sir and Griff went to 1. I mean, because you had the ability to send them quickly to the graveyard, then you're able to do what you need to do. Sir allow you to bring them back from the graveyard, with the exception of his own name. And Griff allow you to summon from the deck. Now, argumentatively, they could come back to 3. But that's for Konami and the Americans, or American branch of Konami, TCG player, or the TCG and all that, we'll have to discuss on a later time. I don't see it happening anytime soon, but I do understand why Eternal Lady is at the 1, because she is just too powerful. She is too powerful for the deck to not be dealt with. And Dante, a lot of players will have issues with Dante, because Dante is a good recycler. He is one of the best cards in the game when it comes to what he does. He's able to be a 2500 defense, a body that most players can't deal with unless they go into their card effects for it, because you don't really summon any monsters that are higher attack unless you're a Blue Eyes player or someone of that nature. But he's also able to send cards from the deck to the grave as a cost, and for each card that was sent to the grave, he gains an additional 500 attack. But not only that, even if he attacks after battle, he goes into defense mode, as long as his effect isn't negated, which means he's able to change his battle position after battle. And that's one of the things that players don't like dealing with, is because, one, you have a monster that not only by detaching material, you can send up to 3 cards to the graveyard, which could be Burning Abyss cards, could be mostly the monsters. Because of that, you have chains going off, you have combos that are starting up, and even if they are non-Burning Abyss monsters, they could be cards such as Phoenix Rhino Warrior. It could be even, I've seen Dandelion being played in this deck before. I don't know why. I think it was mostly for Plant Engine Hybrid, but the thing of the matter is, Dandelion is actually, can be put in there by Dante. And you also have other cards that could be more defensive cards. But the point of the matter is, Dante can do this. And if he dies, he can grab a Burning Abyss monster, including himself, but not the card that was sent. If there was another Dante in the grave, he can just recycle him back to the extra deck. Or he can grab a Burning Abyss card and add it back to your hand. So he allows you to do what you need to do. And he doesn't have to be on the field to do this. He can just be sent to the graveyard. Either because he was detached for Downward Magician for her effect, or for any other applications, even for a fusion summon. Because you can fusion summon by using free Burning Abyss, and he's classified as a Burning Abyss by his name. Which means you get your resources back, you can do what you need to do, and you keep the combo going. So, for people who think that Burning Abyss should not be competing in 2018, their only big thing right now is Ash Blossom, evenly matched, and anything that banishes or negates their effects that are going in the graveyard. But on field, such as Ghost Ogre and stuff like that, they have no worries about this, because even a Solemn Judgment can't stop these guys unless it's directly affecting them in the grave. And because Solemn Judgment is a trap card that states summons, magic, or trap effects, he can't hit Burning Abyss effects and everything. This is where Solemn Warning, I keep arguing about, is the better trap. Solemn Scolding will be the better trap if you can find a way around its costs. Solemn Strike is the best trap card that we have right now because it's at 3. But I personally believe Solemn Warning, if it was at 3 and Strike didn't exist, it would be the best Solemn trap card we have. But that's the only real answers that people have against Burning Abyss. Now, there are ways for the Pendulum Magicians to do this and everything like that, and they can really destroy a Burning Abyss player if they play it right. But Burning Abyss has a lot of trap cards that they can utilize. They have a lot of monster effects, and they even have Eternal Lady, which she can activate during either player's turn. She is a trap of her own. And not only that, but she detaches material that's on her, more likely at Dante, and possibly even the materials that Dante has used, which could be Farah, could be Skarm, it could be anything, and then send a card from the deck to the graveyard. And it could be any card. So it could be Burning Abyss monster, a Burning Abyss trap card, if need be, like Fire Lake, because Fire Lake can blow up stuff, but it's not as played as it used to be. But Burning Abyss has all these options, and yet it doesn't compete in the meta normally, because people are looking for newer things to do. And because of that, Burning Abyss can actually, use that at their advantage, because no one is learning about these cards. I think one of the biggest things I had against competitive players, for the most part, is that they give up on this old knowledge that you need to have. Because the history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, you don't need to learn every card, but you need to learn about the important cards, or what cards can affect your deck. And most players, at least nowadays, like the older players, will still have some knowledge, but newer players do not have the ability to understand older cards because they're not willing to learn. As long as you have knowledge about the older cards, you can actually figure a way to get around them. But because most of the players that were at the YCS or whatever event this was, did not understand what Burning Abyss was capable of and the mechanical function of the deck itself. And that is the biggest shame, because if you don't use the knowledge that you acquire from previous formats and everything like that, then how are you going to advance as a good player? I think a lot of newer generations thinks that you don't need the knowledge of the older stuff to be a good player, but you do. You can have all the knowledge of the new stuff all you want until you get something better and forget about what you have learned now. But good players know what older cards will do. Even if it's the most obscure card in the world, they'll at least try to learn it when they see it the first time and try to figure a way around it. So the biggest issue that most people are having is not because Burning Abyss won. It's because how do they win in 2018? Well, it's because you don't apply knowledge to what used to be. And that's pretty much a double-edged sword for you, because if you don't learn from your past, how do you advance in the future? Because your past is what makes the future better. Having understand history of this game, having to understand what the formats in the past did, that is why, Yu-Gi-Oh! Can become a better game. And that is why, when certain cards come off that ban list and everything like that, you have these newer players that are thinking, well, how did these work? Why were these banned in the past? It's because in the past, the format was slower. But the main reason that cards are coming off the list now is because they're obsolete in a sense. That doesn't mean they'll be obsolete forever. It just means in the current format that you're in right now, they are not doing anything. But in newer formats, including this one, Burning Abyss has been around for a very long time. A good 6 years, I believe. 5 or 6 years. And they are still relevant because they use what they are good at. And players who are new to the game have no knowledge of the past. So if you don't learn from past events and everything like that, how do you expect to learn from what's going to happen now when someone brings back an old deck? Especially like Blue Eyes. I bet Gladiator Beasts could actually make a comeback, not because of any new cards or anything like that, but because of their old mechanics. I'm sure that they would have Ash Blossom and stuff like that stop them. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of younger players would have issues with Gladiator Beasts because they don't know what the deck is capable of, because they don't try to learn what they've seen. Every deck that I usually see, I usually try to have an understanding of. Try to understand how it works. I might not learn how to play it myself, but I will at least learn how it functions, what its purpose is, and try to find a way to get around that. At least that's what I used to do in a competitive play and everything like that. Casually, I don't have to do that as much, but I still try to learn. I still try to learn what the new stuff does, how the old stuff affects the new stuff, and do they have any singularity, or do they not work with one another? And because of that, older decks become relevant in the newer age. So that's generally what you have to look at. If you allow yourself to learn from the past, it doesn't have to be everything, but you have to at least learn enough to what of the important events happened in the past, you can be prepared for the future. And that's pretty much my message about all this. Burning Abyss didn't win because of, it was just skill alone. They won because people do not know what the past was, at least when it comes to the newer generation. The older generation does, in some cases, learn from this, but they might be influenced by the new generation's thought patterns on this, which means that the newer generation and some of the older generations are not even paying attention to the old stuff. But they should. They should always pay attention to history. History is what brings us to a better understanding of the game. And that's all I really have to say about that. And I do appreciate y'all for watching this video. And y'all have a good night.